In this podcast episode, Brigham Buhler joins Joe Rogan for a wide-ranging conversation that delves deep into healthcare, politics, technology, and the future of humanity. Buhler, with his background as a former drug and medical device representative turned owner of blood and pharmacogenetic labs, shares insider perspectives on the pharmaceutical industry's corruption and the battle for innovation in medicine. Buhler opens with a scathing critique of the pharmaceutical industry's deep infiltration into every layer of the U.S. healthcare system, particularly agencies like the FDA, CDC, and NIH. Drawing on his early career experience as a drug rep for Eli Lilly and subsequent roles in medical labs, he describes witnessing firsthand the collusion, corporate capture, and obstructionism that stifle genuine medical progress. He paints a picture of a system dominated by legacy employees and lobbyists working to protect incumbent interests, particularly criticizing the revolving door between government agencies and pharmaceutical companies. He highlights that under the current leadership of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at the Department of Health and Human Services, there is a significant pushback against this entrenched corruption. However, Buhler notes the challenge is immense given the vast federal bureaucracy of 70,000 employees, many of whom resist reform efforts. The analogy of trying to steer the Titanic aptly illustrates the immense inertia and internal resistance to change in these organizations. One of the most detailed segments revolves around peptides and compounded medicines, a field in which Buhler is deeply involved. He explains that peptides, naturally occurring signaling molecules critical to health and longevity, are under threat from big pharmaceutical companies like Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. These companies seek to monopolize peptide-related drugs, particularly GLP-1 analogs used for weight loss, by pressing the FDA to restrict compounding pharmacies from producing cost-effective and personalized peptide treatments. Buhler lays out how compounding pharmacies provide customizable, lower-dosage treatments that avoid the side effects and high costs associated with big pharma products. Conversely, pharmaceutical companies lobby the FDA with narratives casting compounded medicines as unsafe, while their own manufacturing plants have been cited for serious violations. Restrictions on compounding pharmacies not only limit patient access, but also cement pharma monopolies by reclassifying drugs as biologics, thereby extending patent protections and banning compounding altogether. This, he argues, leads to skyrocketing prices and stifling of innovation. Buhler offers an insider perspective into the FDA's internal dysfunction and its critical role in the pharmaceutical ecosystem. He recounts meetings with FDA officials where they appeared polite and receptive, but ultimately dismissed concerns and continued policies favoring large pharmaceutical corporations. He points out that over 60% of FDA funding now comes from industry fees, skewing agency priorities. Consequently, the FDA's decisions often chronically delay or block access to important treatments, especially from compounding pharmacies and innovative startups unable to afford costly approval processes. Furthermore, Buhler reveals that within the FDA, there are so-called legacy employees and internal factions actively working against reforms mandated by the current administration. He mentions leaked court documents and memos intending to undermine new federal mandates, highlighting systemic resistance to change that goes beyond politics and ultimately hurts patients. The discussion shifts to mental health, where Buhler exposes how pharmaceutical companies shape the concepts of depression and anxiety, often to expand their markets. He emphasizes the subjectivity of mental health diagnoses, pointing out that criteria like the chemical imbalance theory have been largely debunked, yet remain the foundation for widespread use of antidepressants, primarily SSRIs. Buhler critiques the minimal efficacy of these drugs, noting placebo-controlled studies show SSRIs barely outperform placebos. He contrasts this with the superior benefits of exercise and red light therapy, which are often overlooked. The overstated promises and harmful side effects of antidepressants, including their association with increased suicidal ideation and violent behavior, are glossed over by pharmaceutical marketing and media. This segment paints a bleak picture of how profit motives have distorted mental health care. Buhler shines a critical light on the modern food industry's role in chronic disease and public health crises. He discusses legislative efforts, such as those in Texas, to remove ultra-processed foods and sugary drinks from public assistance programs like SNAP. Despite overwhelming evidence linking these foods to obesity, diabetes, and inflammation, he describes fierce lobbying from groups including the American Heart Association and food corporations fighting to maintain the status quo. He also touches on glyphosate, a widely used herbicide produced by Monsanto, now Bayer, as a pervasive chemical contaminant found in most Americans' bloodstreams. Buhler laments America's continued reliance on chemical-intensive industrial agriculture, far more permissive than Europe's standards, and the political power preventing meaningful reform. The conversation integrates ecological, social justice, and economic dimensions around food policy and public health. Turning toward hopeful medical innovations, Buhler discusses the growing movement around psychedelic medicine and its potential to revolutionize treatment for addiction, PTSD, and depression. He cites remarkable recovery rates for substance abuse disorders following guided psychedelic experiences, often on par or surpassing traditional treatments. He advocates for patient autonomy and compassionate use practices, arguing against government or bureaucratic interference, limiting access to peptides, stem cells, and psychedelics, particularly for terminal or severely ill patients. Buhler points to progressive state legislation, public frustration with broken systems, and the role of pioneers like RFK Jr. as signals of shifting momentum toward more holistic and personalized healthcare models. The conversation moves into the cutting-edge realms of genetic science and bioengineering. Buhler discusses how technologies like CRISPR gene editing promise to radically enhance human capacities, including adjusting IQ by significant margins across generations. This kind of biotechnology, he notes, already underway in countries like China, will force a global arms race in bioengineering, raising complex ethical, social, and geopolitical questions about human evolution and inequality. He envisions a future where designer babies and superhumans could become the norm, and where nations without access or regulations risk losing out in a dramatic technological shift. His reflections on these possibilities expose the tension between optimism for human potential and caution over unintended consequences. Buhler shares detailed thoughts on the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence and its societal impact, especially concerning privacy, data misuse, and the changing nature of work. He recounts how AI is becoming increasingly pervasive, from generating social media content to monitoring global communications, often by state actors engaged in disinformation. The episode discusses the risks of AI-driven surveillance systems, predictive policing, and mass data profiling potentially eroding civil liberties. Buhler raises concerns about centralized control over powerful technologies, arguing for decentralized systems to prevent totalitarian misuse. He expresses a profound ambivalence about AI as both a transformative tool and a threat to human autonomy. A provocative segment centers on the future blending of human consciousness with technology. Buhler speculates about brain-computer interfaces, telepathic communication, and immersive virtual realities, where individuals might download knowledge instantly or experience alternate digital existences. Drawing from emerging tech like infrared vision contact lenses and virtual reality, he paints a picture of humanity approaching a post-biological era. At the heart of this vision lies the question of identity and control, whether society can ensure such powerful integrations remain free from manipulation, and whether distinct individual humanity can survive in a networked hive mind. Buhler expresses cautious optimism, balanced with warnings about addiction, loss of privacy, and the erosion of authentic human experience. Buhler and Rogan pivot to examine fringe and controversial topics such as UFO phenomena, alien life, and unexplained archaeological findings. Drawing on testimony from military insiders and scientists, he discusses the aerodynamic impossibility and unexplained technological features of many reported UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. Besides, they explore ancient mummies with abnormal features found in Peru, which some speculate could signal extraterrestrial origins or advanced ancient species. The episode explores narratives connecting ancient myths, religious texts, and unexplained biological artifacts, suggesting a complex interplay between human history and possible otherworldly influences. Buhler balances skepticism with open curiosity, emphasizing the need for scientific inquiry free of ridicule or dogmatism. The final thread weaves together social, cultural, and political fragmentation amplified by media and online platforms. Buhler examines the modern culture wars, focusing on issues like transgender rights, free speech suppression, and the weaponization of identity politics to divide populations. He describes coordinated disinformation campaigns and ideological manipulation designed to foster distrust among citizens, hampering collective action against larger systemic threats. He cites examples such as the arrest of a UK comedy writer for social media posts, the exploitation of tribalism, and the use of social media bots and AI-generated content to sow confusion. The episode conveys a powerful critique of how narratives are shaped by entrenched interests who profit from social chaos and political polarization. Throughout the episode, Buhler returns to a hopeful and humanistic perspective, stressing the importance of maintaining ethical integrity and compassion amid overwhelming systemic dysfunction. He reflects on the transformative power of personalized medicine, community, and the human will to overcome adversity while rejecting nihilism or despair. Despite acknowledging the profound challenges posed by corrupt industries, technological upheavals, and societal discord, Buhler encourages listeners to cultivate understanding, personal responsibility, and optimism. The conversation ends on a note valuing the potential for human growth, as individuals and collectively, and the possibility of transcending current crises through awareness and innovation.